The air on the 22nd of July, 1812, is thick enough to chew. It is a suffocating, dry Spanish heat, and the undulating plains around the village of Salamanca are choked in a haze of fine, white dust. For weeks, two of the greatest armies in the world have been locked in an intricate, exhausting dance. They march on parallel courses, often just miles apart, each commander waiting for the other to make a single fatal mistake. This is not a war of sieges, it is a war of maneuver, a high-stakes chess match played with 100,000 living pieces. On one side, the French army of Portugal, 50,000 strong. Veterans of Napoleon's conquests, they are confident, aggressive, and brilliantly led. Their commander is Marshal Auguste de Marmont, a man of talent and ambition, convinced he can outwit his famously cautious opponent. On the other, the Allied army, 52,000 British, Portuguese, and Spanish soldiers, under the guiding hand of Arthur Wellesley, the Earl of Wellington. He is a master of defence, a general who prizes patience and position above all else. But today, his patience is a mask, concealing a predator's readiness. By mid-afternoon, the French believe the game is over. Marmont, watching from the high ground of the Greater Arapil, sees dust clouds to his north. He is convinced Wellington is in full retreat, his army streaming away toward Portugal. This is Marmont's moment. He will cut them off, hound their rearguard, and deliver a crushing blow to the British in Spain. He gives the order. His army is to swing left, marching fast to get ahead of the fleeing Allies. His lead division, under General Thomière, surges forward. It marches quickly, too quickly, opening a gap, then a chasm, between itself and the rest of the French line. Miles away, on a low ridge known as the Teso de Cochinos, Wellington raises his telescope. He watches Thomière's division pressing on, a long, thin column of men marching blindly into thin air. He sees the gap widen, a mile, then more. He sees an entire army overextending, its flank exposed and vulnerable. This is the moment he has waited for, not just for days, but for years. He snaps the telescope shut. "By God," he says to his staff, his voice sharp with a sudden, terrible finality. "That will do." Turning to his brother-in-law, Sir Edward Pakenham, he gives the order that will change the course of the war. "Ned, do you see those fellows on the hill? Throw your division at them and drive them to the devil." What happens next will become the stuff of legend. It is the story of how a 50,000-man army was shattered, not in a day, but in 40 minutes. This is Wellington's trap, his most brilliant gamble, and the lightning-fast, devastating counterstroke that broke Napoleon's power in Spain. This is the story of Salamanca. The Battle of Salamanca was not born in an hour. It was the violent climax of a month-long campaign of relentless movement, a duel of wits between two masters of warfare. By the summer of 1812, the Peninsular War had become a bloody stalemate. Napoleon's armies occupied vast swathes of Spain, but they could not crush the combined resistance of the British, their Portuguese allies, and the Spanish guerrillas. Wellington, based in neighbouring Portugal, had proven himself a defensive genius, but now he was on the offensive. His objective was the vital Northern Corridor, the main French supply route, guarded by Marshal Marmont and the 50,000 men of the Army of Portugal. The two commanders were a study in contrasts. Auguste de Marmont was the quintessential product of the Napoleonic system. He was bold, ambitious, and a superb tactician, one of Napoleon's original and most favoured marshals. He believed in the French doctrine of l'audace, toujours l'audace, audacity, always audacity. He sought a decisive, set-piece battle that would annihilate the cautious Wellington and secure his own reputation. He had 78 artillery pieces, a slight advantage over his opponent, and he was not afraid to use them. Wellington was his opposite. Cautious, methodical, and possessing an ironclad patience, he was a master of logistics and the defensive battle. His entire strategy in the peninsula was based on not losing. He could not afford the catastrophic losses that Napoleon's marshals often risked, as the British army was small and its homeland's commitment to the war was fragile. He preferred to choose his ground, usually on the reverse slope of a hill, hiding his numbers and forcing the enemy to attack him blind. But in this campaign, he was forced to be reactive, to march and countermarch, his 52,000 men shadowing the French, waiting for an opportunity that might never come. For weeks, the two armies stalked each other across the dusty, sun-baked plains of Castile. The British Allied Army, with 28,000 British, 21,000 Portuguese, and 3,000 Spanish, was a tough, multinational force. The French, 50,000 strong, were a homogeneous army of veterans. The maneuvers were grueling. The Spanish sun was relentless. Water was scarce. The soldiers marched day after day, often in full view of their enemy, close enough to see their campfires at night. The tension was palpable. This was a war of marches, and both armies were growing exhausted. On July 21st, the day before the battle, the two armies found themselves in a bizarre and dangerous confrontation. They marched on parallel ridges, separated by a narrow valley, heading in the same direction. A violent thunderstorm erupted, concealing the armies in a sudden torrential downpour. When the rain cleared, the two columns were so close that French and British officers, riding with their respective vanguards, merely exchanged salutes as if on parade. This strange, tense proximity could not last. The landscape itself would decide the battle. The terrain was defined by two small rocky hills rising from the plain, the Greater Arapil and the Lesser Arapil. On the morning of July 22nd, a race began. The French, in a swift and brilliant move, seized the Greater Arapil, the larger and more dominant hill. This gave Marmont a powerful central position, a pivot from which his army could maneuver. Wellington's men secured the Lesser Arapil. The two armies were now arrayed opposite each other, the two hills acting as anchors. From his vantage point, Marmont believed he had the upper hand. He could see Wellington's baggage train moving north on the road to Portugal. He mistook this logistical move for a full-scale retreat. This was the critical error, the miscalculation that Wellington's entire campaign had been waiting for. Believing his cautious opponent was finally on the run, Marmont decided to force the issue, to turn a retreat into a rout. He would sweep his army left, marching fast along a ridge to cut the road and block Wellington's escape. It was an aggressive, confident, and utterly fatal decision. It is just before 4 p.m. The battlefield is a cauldron. Marshal Marmont, from his dominant position on the Greater Arapil, strains to see through the shimmering heat and the occasional, violent gust of dust that sweeps the plain. He is fixated on the road to the north, the artery leading back to Ciudad Rodrigo and Portugal. He sees movement, a long train of wagons and mules, Wellington's baggage. For an aggressive commander like Marmont, the conclusion is simple and intoxicating. The famously defensive Wellington is finally beaten, spooked by the French flanking maneuvers and the loss of the Greater Arapil. He is running. This single, flawed assumption seals the fate of his army. Marmont's impatience, his desire for a glorious victory over the sepoy general, overrides his tactical caution. He decides to turn a retreat into a rout. The plan is audacious. He will push his army's left wing rapidly, swinging it like a gate to intercept the road north and trap the fleeing allies against the Tormes River. It is a classic Napoleonic finishing move. He gives the order. The entire French left, division by division, is to begin this great wheeling march. The man tasked with leading this charge is General Thomières, commander of the French 7th Division. Thomières is a good soldier, and he executes his orders with speed and precision. His 4,500 men, arrayed in deep marching columns, step off with purpose. They are focused only on the objective to their north, the road. They march fast, their boots kicking up a tremendous cloud of that fine white dust. They begin to move too fast. They are outpacing the rest of the army. Behind them, General Moncun's 5th Division tries to keep up, but the pace is too hot. A gap begins to open. First, it is a few hundred yards. Then, as Thomières' men surge relentlessly forward, it becomes half a mile. Then, a full mile. The French left wing, which should be a solid, cohesive line of battle, is stretching, elongating, and finally breaking apart. Marmont has, in his haste, transformed his army from a clenched fist into a series of disconnected fingers, all pointing in the same direction, all blind to the danger on their flank. He has created a vulnerable, overextended line over 5 miles long. Meanwhile, Wellington has not retreated. He is exactly where he wants to be. He has spent the afternoon on a low, insignificant-looking ridge called the Teso de Cochinos, hidden from Marmont's view. With him is his eagle-eyed staff, and most importantly, his secret weapon. Hidden just behind the reverse slope of this very ridge, lying down in the dust to avoid detection, is the entirety of his elite 3rd Division. Commanded by Sir Edward Pakenham, these 5,000 men are Wellington's fighting 3rd, a veteran unit of exceptional quality, poised like a coiled spring. Wellington, his telescope to his eye, watches the entire French maneuver unfold. He sees Thomiès's division march into the void. He sees the telltale gap widen behind it. He can see what Marmont cannot, the exposed, vulnerable flank of an army on the march. This is the cardinal sin of Napoleonic warfare, and Marmont has just committed it on a grand scale. This is the one fleeting moment of opportunity that Wellington's entire defensive career has trained him to recognize. He is not a general of grand gambles, but he is a master of exploiting an opponent's error. And this is no error. It is a catastrophe. His staff sees him stiffen. The legendary caution vanishes, replaced by a sudden, cold decisiveness. He snaps his telescope shut. According to those present, he turns to his Spanish liaison officer and remarks with icy calm, "Marmont is lost. The trap is set. The bait has been taken. Now all that remains is to spring it. The clock is ticking. The 40-minute masterpiece is about to begin. The decision is instantaneous. There is no staff conference, no council of war. There is only Wellington, his observation post, and the fatal flaw in his enemy's army laid bare before him. The moment he snaps his telescope shut, the Allied army, which had been passive and reactive all day, transforms into an engine of destruction. The trigger is Wellington's order to his brother-in-law, Sir Edward Pakenham. Pakenham is the commander of the 3rd Division, the 5,000 men lying in the dust just over the crest of the ridge. He is a fiery, energetic Irishman, and his division, the Fighting 3rd, reflects his character. They are a mix of elite British regiments and tough Portuguese caçadores, veterans of some of the bloodiest fights in the peninsula. They have spent the last several hours in agonizing, baking heat, hidden from French eyes, listening to the cannonade ebb and flow, waiting for a command that might never come. Wellington rides directly to Pakenham. The words he uses are not the formal language of a 19th century general. They are direct, sharp, and visceral. "Ned," he orders, pointing with his arm toward the rapidly marching French column, now clearly visible in the gap. "Do you see those fellows on the hill? Throw your division at them and drive them to the devil." Pakenham, a man who lives for such a moment, is said to have given a short, enthusiastic reply before galloping off to unleash his men. The order ripples outward. Bugles sound. Sergeants roar commands. In a matter of seconds, 5,000 men are on their feet. The French on the Greater Arapil, their attention still fixed northward, suddenly see a sight that freezes their blood. The empty, dusty Teso de Cochinos, which they had ignored all day, suddenly comes alive. A solid 3-mile-long wave of men, their coats a startling bright red, crests the ridge and begins to descend. This is the reverse slope tactic in its most devastating, offensive form. Marmont had no idea they were there. For Thomiès's men, still marching confidently, their flank is completely in the air, undefended, unwarned, and about to be hit by a storm. Pakenham's attack is a marvel of tactical deployment. His division is not in a heavy, slow-moving column. It deploys almost instantly into a 2-deep line of battle. This is the signature formation of the British infantry, the one that has won them battle after battle against the French. Where a French column presents a narrow front with deep ranks, the British line is all front. It is a long, thin red line, just 2 men deep, but it allows every single one of its 2,500 muskets in the front rank to be brought to bear at once. It is a formation designed for one purpose: to deliver the most shattering, concentrated volley of musket fire in the world. As the 3rd Division descends the slope, it picks up speed. This is not a cautious advance, it is an assault. The men are ordered to hold their fire. They march in perfect order, their bayonets fixed, the sun glinting off thousands of points of steel. They are marching directly at the flank of Thomière's division. The French soldiers, caught mid-stride, try desperately to react. They are in marching columns, the worst possible formation for receiving an attack. They try to turn, to form a new front, but there is no time. The red wave is moving too fast. At a range of less than 100 yards, the British officers give the command. The 3rd Division halts as one. The front rank drops to a knee. The rear rank stands. They level their 75 caliber Brown Bess muskets, and 2,500 pieces of lead tear the air apart. The first volley is a single, deafening crash, a sound like tearing silk magnified 1,000 times. It scythes through the packed French columns, ripping men apart. Before the thick, acrid black powder smoke can even obscure the view, the British line has reloaded and fires again. And again. The French 7th Division, 4,500 men strong, is hit by a wall of lead from an enemy they didn't even know existed seconds before. Their formation dissolves. They are no longer a division. They are a mob. Their commander, General Thomière's, is killed almost instantly. The entire French left is, in a single moment, broken and beginning to disintegrate. But this is only the beginning of the assault. Pakenham's infantry has just fired the opening shot, but Wellington's plan is a synchronized symphony of destruction. It is not just an infantry attack, it is a combined arms assault. As the 3rd Division's volleys are tearing Thomière's division apart, another, even more terrifying sound is added to the din. The low, rolling thunder of 1,000 charging horses. Hidden just behind Pakenham's men, Wellington had pre-positioned his killer blow, Major General John Le Marchant's heavy cavalry brigade. Le Marchant is a brilliant cavalry theorist, a man who has dedicated his life to perfecting the art of the shock charge. His brigade consists of 3 regiments: the 5th Dragoon Guards, the 3rd Dragoons, and the 4th Dragoons. These are not light cavalry for scouting. They are the giants of the army, huge men on huge horses, wielding the 1796 heavy cavalry sword, a straight 35-inch blade designed not for slashing, but for one terrible driving thrust. They are a medieval battering ram, a 1,000-man projectile of muscle, steel, and speed. As the smoke from the first infantry volley clears, Le Marchant sees the French infantry line waver, recoil, and then shatter. This is the moment. He gives the order. The bugles sound the charge. The brigade moves off, first at a walk, then a trot, their lines dressing as they go. They crest the ridge, and as they see their target, the panicked, dissolving remnants of Thomière's division, they break into a full, thundering gallop. The ground is perfect for a charge, a hard, dry, gentle slope. The 1,000 hooves of the heavy brigade sound like an avalanche, a sound that strikes a primal terror into the hearts of infantry. The French soldiers, already reeling from the musket fire, look up to see a wall of horsemen bearing down on them. They have no time to form the square, the only infantry formation that could possibly stop a cavalry charge. They are still in their broken columns. The dragoons hit them with an impact that is physically shattering. The heavy cavalry, led personally by Le Marchant, smashes through the French formation, sabering and riding down the panicked infantry. The 1796 swords, backed by the momentum of a galloping horse, are devastating. The French 7th Division, attacked from the flank by elite infantry and now from the rear by heavy cavalry, ceases to exist. It is utterly annihilated, its men scattered, killed, or captured in a matter of minutes. But Le Marchant is not finished. His blood is up, and he sees the next target. Directly ahead is General Mokoun's 5th Division. Mokoun's men had been marching behind Thomière, and they watch in horror as the division in front of them disappears. They try desperately to form squares, the hedgehog-like formations of bayonets designed to repel horses. Some regiments succeed, but Le Marchant's brigade, still carried by their unstoppable momentum, is upon them. They are joined now by elements of Wellington's 5th Division under General James Leith, who are attacking Montcalm's front. Hit from two sides at once, even the French squares cannot hold. The heavy dragoons, in a feat of almost suicidal bravery, charge directly into the bayonets. The sheer weight and speed of the charge breaks the squares. The infantry is scattered, and the slaughter continues. In less than 20 minutes, Le Marchand's brigade has ridden through and destroyed two entire French divisions, one after the other. It is one of the most successful and destructive heavy cavalry charges of the entire Napoleonic Wars. At the very height of this triumph, as he rides at the head of his men, John Le Marchand is struck by a musket ball and killed instantly. He dies at the apex of his masterpiece, having delivered the blow that has just won the Battle of Salamanca. His charge has ripped the entire French left wing from Marmont's army. The time is approximately 5:30 p.m. While the Allied left wing is experiencing its moment of supreme bloody triumph, the French High Command is undergoing its own personal apocalypse. Marshal Auguste de Marmont, from his command post on the Greater Arapil, has seen the whole disaster unfold in a few horrifying minutes. The man who, less than an hour ago, was so confident of Wellington's retreat, now watches his own army being torn in two. He sees the impossible. A hidden division of British infantry, the feared Rojo Abrigos, appearing from the empty ground as if summoned from the earth itself. He sees their disciplined, systematic volleys, firing like a machine, chewing through Thomieres' exposed flank. He sees the glint of steel as Le Marchand's heavy cavalry crests the ridge, a wave of 1,000 horsemen that accelerates into an unstoppable avalanche. He watches, in what must have felt like a sickening, slow-motion nightmare, as that cavalry charge erases two of his divisions, 10,000 men, from the field of battle. His entire left wing has not just been defeated, it has been annihilated. In this desperate, critical moment, Marmont is no coward. He is a Marshal of France, and he knows he must act immediately to save his army. The battle is lost, but the army can perhaps be saved from total destruction. He needs to organize a new front, to deploy his reserves, to form a defensive line with his center and right-wing divisions. He begins to shout orders, preparing to ride into the fray himself to rally his reeling army. But he will never get the chance. Wellington's victory is being sealed not just by infantry and cavalry, but by his artillery. The British cannons, including the technologically advanced shrapnel shells, have been pounding the French command post on the Greater Arapil. As Marmont is frantically trying to organize a response, a British shell screams overhead. It is not a solid cannonball, it is something far more sinister. It is a spherical case shot, a hollow iron ball filled with musket balls and a bursting charge, designed to explode in the air above its target. The shell detonates directly over Marmont and his staff. The explosion is a cloud of smoke and whistling metal. Marmont is struck. The shrapnel shatters his right arm and smashes into his side, breaking ribs. The pain is agonizing, catastrophic. He collapses, falling from his horse, and is carried from the field, a broken man. The army of Portugal is now leaderless. In an almost unbelievable stroke of misfortune for the French, the chain of command breaks down completely. Marmont's designated second-in-command, General Bonnet, is also wounded by shellfire almost immediately after. The entire French leadership structure has been decapitated at the single most critical moment of the battle. The left wing is gone, the centre is wavering, and the commander-in-chief is a mangled wreck, being carted to the rear. The French army, 50,000 strong, is suddenly an orphan, a headless giant. Its divisions are fighting in isolation. There is no one to give a strategic order. There is no one to direct the reserves. There is no one to organize a retreat. Into this vacuum of command, the British 5th Division under James Leith continues its grinding assault on the French centre, supported by Pakenham's triumphant, if now disorganized, 3rd Division. The Allied attack is rolling up the French line, division by division. The French, leaderless and reeling, are fighting in desperate, isolated pockets. But the cohesion of their army is gone. It is no longer a battle, it is a rout. But even in this moment of total chaos, one man is about to step forward and attempt the impossible, to save the honour of France and his army from total annihilation. With Marmont and Bonnet both critically wounded and the entire French left wing erased from the battlefield. The army of Portugal is no longer a coherent fighting force. It is a body without a head, its constituent parts, its divisions, fighting and dying in isolated pockets of resistance, devoid of a central plan. Panic is beginning to spread. The centre is crumbling under the relentless pressure of Leith's 5th Division. The victorious British and Portuguese, though disorganised by the sheer speed of their own success, are bayoneting and shooting their way through the disintegrating French formations. For any other army, on any other day, this would be the end. A total, catastrophic rout. But this is Napoleon's Grande Armée, and in its ranks is a general of extraordinary skill and ironclad resolve, General Bertrand Clausel. Clausel, a divisional commander, sees the disaster unfolding. He sees the command structure decapitated, the left wing gone, the centre collapsing. But he also sees something else. He sees an opportunity, a fleeting, desperate chance born from Wellington's own success. The Allied army, in its ferocious forward lunge, has become disordered. Pakenham's 3rd Division and Le Marchand's cavalry are a spent force, victorious, but scattered and exhausted. The 5th Division is fully committed. The Allied centre, which is now bearing the brunt of the rolling up action, is itself becoming overextended. In this moment of supreme crisis, Clausel takes command of the entire army. There is no time for formal succession. He seizes control with the force of his will. He is a superb general, perhaps the only man on the field who could have saved the French from total annihilation. He makes a brilliant, audacious decision. He will not try to form a defensive line. He will not organize a simple retreat. He will counterattack. He gathers his own division, which has been held in reserve and is therefore fresh, along with the remnants of other formations. He forms a new, solid front from the ashes of the old. This is no mere holding action. He orders a full-blown assault directly at the weakened Allied centre. He is aiming for the seam, the weak point in Wellington's victorious but disorganised line. It is a furious, desperate, and incredibly brave manoeuvre. It is the army's last gamble. The French counterattack, led by Clausel's fresh troops, hits the Allied 4th and 5th Divisions with terrifying force. This phase of the battle, coming after 6 p.m. as the hot Spanish sun begins to dip, becomes the single bloodiest and most contested fight of the day. The acrid black powder smoke is now so thick that it chokes the battlefield in a dense, sulphurous fog. In this gloom, thousands of men collide at close quarters. The roar of musketry is continuous, not in volleys, but in a chaotic, desperate firefight. For a terrifying moment, Clausel's gambit works. The French, fighting with the desperation of men whose lives and honour are on the line, push the Allies back. The British and Portuguese, weary from their earlier assault and shocked by this sudden, ferocious counterblow, begin to bend. Regiments recoil. Officers are cut down trying to rally their men. The battle, which seemed so decisively won just minutes before, is suddenly thrown back into the balance. Clausel's men are fighting with a savage intensity, clawing back the ground that had been lost. Wellington's centre is buckling. The great victory is on the verge of unravelling, and the fate of the battle now hangs on a single, fragile thread. The centre of the Allied line is a swirl of chaos and acrid, choking smoke. The triumphant redcoats of the 4th and 5th Divisions, who had been pushing forward just moments before, are now in a desperate melee, fighting for their lives. Clausel's counterattack is a masterpiece of desperation. His fresh troops, fueled by rage and a desire to reclaim the day, have punched a bloody hole in Wellington's army. The sound of the battle changes. The crisp, rolling volleys of the attack have dissolved into a frantic, close-range firefight. Bayonets are used with brutal intimacy. Regimental colours sway, fall, and are raised again. For this brief, terrible period, the battle is no longer Wellington's. It belongs to Clausel. But Wellington is not a man to be caught without a plan. He is the master of the reserve. Throughout the entire chaotic 40-minute assault, he has held one crucial piece back. While his 3rd and 5th Divisions and his heavy cavalry had been committed to the decisive stroke, he had kept his 6th Division waiting. These men, thousands of fresh British and Portuguese infantry, had been posted in reserve, forced to watch the entire spectacle, the glorious charge, the disintegration of the French left, and now the terrifying counterattack that threatens to undo it all. They are fresh, they are disciplined, and they are ready. As the Allied centre sags, Wellington acts. He gives the order to commit his last reserve. The 6th Division is sent marching, not into the flank of a retreating enemy, but directly into the teeth of Clausel's ferocious assault. This is the climax of the battle, the final decisive collision. The 6th Division advances through the smoke and the retreating, wounded men of their sister divisions. They march in perfect parade ground order, their dark blue for the Portuguese and red for the British uniforms, appearing as a solid, implacable wall in the twilight. Clausel's men, exhausted from their own heroic charge, look up to see yet another fresh line of British infantry bearing down on them. They have broken 2 divisions, but now a third, untouched and in perfect formation, is here to contest the field. The 2 lines halt, level their muskets, and the evening is ripped apart by a deafening volley. But where the French are firing in a more desperate, ragged way, the 6th Division delivers the classic, systematic, rolling volleys of the British Army. Their fire is controlled, rapid, and devastating. This is the breaking point. The French counterattack, which had so much momentum, smashes against this fresh wall of infantry and steel. It falters, stops, and then, under the relentless, disciplined fire, it begins to recoil. The French troops, having given their absolute last measure of devotion, finally break. Their heroic gamble has failed. The men who had charged forward so bravely now turn and run. This is the signal for the entire French army. The last coherent unit has been broken. The counterattack has failed. The left wing is gone. The centre is shattered. The commanders are wounded or dead. As darkness begins to fall around 9:01 p.m., the French army dissolves. It is no longer an army at all. It is a terrified, defeated, and leaderless mob. A general rout begins. Tens of thousands of men throw down their muskets, abandon their cannons, and flee into the growing darkness, their only thought to escape the relentless pursuit of the British and the sabres of the Allied cavalry. They stream eastward, a human torrent of panic, heading for the bridge at Alba de Tormes, the only viable escape route in the deepening bloody night. Night falls on a field of apocalyptic chaos. The battle, which had been decided in a 40-minute flash of tactical brilliance, has left a ruin in its wake. The moon rises over the plains of Salamanca to illuminate a landscape of profound suffering. The sounds of pursuit, the sporadic pop of musket fire, the shouts of officers, the thudding of cavalry hooves, fade into the east as the victorious Allied light cavalry harry the fleeing French mob. But on the battlefield itself, a new, terrible sound emerges, the collective groaning and screaming of over 19,000 men who lie dead, dying, or in agony. The butcher's bill for Wellington's 40-minute masterpiece is staggering, and it falls almost entirely on one side. The French army of Portugal has not just been defeated, it has been eviscerated. Out of 50,000 men, approximately 14,000 are casualties. This is a catastrophic loss, nearly a third of their army, lost in a single afternoon's engagement. The fields and ridges are thick with the dead and wounded. Thousands more are captured, rounded up in the darkness by Allied patrols, their spirit to fight or flee completely broken. In contrast, the Allied cost, while heavy, is a fraction of their enemies. Wellington has lost approximately 5,000 men, killed and wounded. It is a grim price, and the death of the brilliant John Le Marchand, killed at the apex of his charge, is a grievous blow. But in the brutal arithmetic of Napoleonic warfare, this is a stunningly lopsided victory. Wellington has traded one man for every 3 of his opponents, and, in the exchange, has broken an entire army. But the true measure of the rout is not just in men, but in materiel and morale. The French have lost their artillery. In their panic, they abandoned their guns, and the Allies capture approximately 20 cannons. More importantly, they have lost their honor. In the chaos of the rout, 2 of Napoleon's coveted imperial eagles, the sacred standards given by the emperor himself, which French regiments swore to defend to the death, are captured. The loss of an eagle is the ultimate disgrace, a symbolic evisceration that resounds far beyond the battlefield. 6 other regimental colours are also taken. As the night wears on, the victors begin the grim work of securing the field. The scale of the destruction wrought by Pakenham's infantry and Le Marchand's cavalry is laid bare. The path of the Heavy Brigade, in particular, is a scene of unimaginable carnage. The ground where Thomier's and Maucoun's divisions had stood is a charnel house, a testament to the raw kinetic power of 1,000 charging dragoons. The British soldiers, hardened veterans all, wander the field, collecting the wounded of both sides, but also plundering the dead, a grim but accepted perk of the common soldier. The French army, meanwhile, is in a state of total dissolution. The survivors stream back, not just in defeat, but in a panic that will not abate for days. General Clausel, despite his heroic counterattack, is now focused only on saving the wreckage of his army. He leads a desperate fighting retreat, but the army of Portugal, as a proud, offensive instrument of Napoleon's will, is finished. It will take months to rebuild and re-equip. Months it does not have. Wellington has achieved the seemingly impossible. He has met a veteran French army, roughly equal in size to his own, on an open field. And he has, through patience, concealment, and a single, decisive, lightning-fast blow, utterly shattered it. He has proven he is not just a defensive genius, but a master of the offensive battle as well. The victory is total. The strategic consequences of this lopsided butcher's bill are about to be felt across the entire continent. The shockwaves from Salamanca spread across Spain with the speed of a signal fire. The battle was not just a tactical victory, it was a strategic thunderclap. The road to Madrid, the capital of Spain, was suddenly and completely open. For years, the Allies had nibbled at the edges of Napoleon's Spanish kingdom, but the heartland had remained firmly in French hands, ruled by Napoleon's brother, King Joseph. Now, the army that had been tasked with defending that heartland, Marmont's army of Portugal, was a broken rabble, fleeing for its life. General Clausel, whose heroic counterattack had saved the French from total annihilation, now conducted a masterful retreat. He was a superb general, and he did everything in his power to salvage the wreckage. He gathered the survivors, organized rearguards, and fought desperate small-scale actions to buy time. But he could not stop the inevitable. He was not just retreating, he was being hounded. Wellington, sensing a war-winning opportunity, was relentless. The Allied cavalry, light and fresh, pursued the French relentlessly, capturing thousands more stragglers. For King Joseph Bonaparte, in his palace in Madrid, the news of Salamanca was an unmitigated disaster. The army meant to protect him had been smashed. Wellington, the sepoy general his brother Napoleon had so often mocked, was now marching directly for the capital. Joseph had no army capable of stopping him. The French grip on Spain, which had seemed so absolute, suddenly appeared fragile, perhaps even illusory. Panic set in. On August 12, 1812, just 3 weeks after the battle, Arthur Wellesley, the Earl of Wellington, rode into Madrid at the head of his victorious Allied army. The liberation was a moment of pure, ecstatic triumph. The people of Madrid, who had lived under French occupation for years, poured into the streets in a delirious celebration. They saw Wellington not as a foreign general, but as a liberator. Crowds thronged the streets, cheering, weeping, and throwing flowers at the feet of the red-coated soldiers. The Spanish, who had fought so bitterly against the French through their guerrilla warfare, finally had their capital back. It was a symbolic and political victory of immeasurable importance. This moment was the high watermark of Wellington's Peninsular campaign. He had not just won a battle, he had undone years of French conquest in a single 40-minute action. The strategic map of Spain was redrawn overnight. The French were forced to abandon vast territories. To counter this new central threat, they had to pull troops from all corners of Spain, even lifting the long, grinding, and symbolic siege of Cadiz in the south. The Spanish ulcer, as Napoleon called it, was now bleeding profusely. Back in France, the news was received with stunned disbelief. Napoleon himself, at that very moment, was marching his own Grande Armée deep into the heart of Russia, heading for Moscow. He had stripped Spain of his best troops for that invasion, confident that his marshals, like Marmont, could contain Wellington. Now, he was faced with a two-front disaster. His main army was committed thousands of miles to the east, while the war in the west, which he had thought was under control, had just exploded in his face. Marmont's 40-minute error had not just cost him an army, it had jeopardized the emperor's entire European-wide strategy. The trap Wellington had sprung at Salamanca would have consequences far beyond the dusty plains of Spain. It would be felt in the frozen snows of Russia. How was a veteran army of 50,000 men, led by one of Napoleon's most talented marshals, shattered in 40 minutes? The Battle of Salamanca was not a miracle. It was a tactical execution, the perfect and violent collision of a flawed French doctrine with a superior, patient, and perfectly led Allied system. It was, in every sense, Wellington's masterpiece. A battle that showcased every single one of his unique talents as a general. First, it was a battle of commanders. Marshal Marmont was a brilliant and aggressive product of the French system, a system that prized audacity and the offensive. He saw Wellington's baggage train moving, and his own doctrine supplied the only possible answer: retreat. His arrogance and his underestimation of his opponent led him to commit the cardinal sin of Napoleonic warfare. He overextended his line, marching his divisions in sequence, blind to the threat on his flank. He presented his army to Wellington not as a clenched fist, but as an open, vulnerable hand. Wellington, in contrast, was the master of patience. His entire strategy was built on waiting for this exact kind of mistake. His use of the reverse slope at Salamanca was the tactic in its most lethal offensive form. He didn't just hide his men behind the Teso de Cochinos to protect them from cannon fire. He hid his 5,000-man 3rd Division as a concealed weapon, a loaded pistol pressed to the temple of the French army. Marmont had no idea an elite fresh division was poised to strike his flank. When Wellington snapped his telescope shut, he was not taking a gamble. He was seizing a certainty. Second, it was a battle of formations. The decisive moment, Pakenham's attack, was the ultimate demonstration of the British line versus column superiority. The French 7th Division was caught in marching columns, a formation designed for movement, not fighting. It presented a deep, dense target with a very narrow front. Pakenham's 3rd Division deployed into the thin red line, just 2 men deep. This line was a wall of muskets. It brought hundreds of guns to bear on the flank of a formation that could barely fire back. The French columns were not defeated. They were mechanically shredded by disciplined massed volley fire before they could even deploy. Finally, it was a masterpiece of combined arms. Wellington did not just use infantry. He unleashed a perfectly timed symphony of destruction. Pakenham's infantry broke the French line. Le Marchant's heavy cavalry, following immediately behind, shattered it. The infantry created the breach, and the cavalry, acting as a 1,000-man battering ram, plunged through it, turning a retreat into a rout and annihilating 2 divisions in 20 minutes. And all the while, the Allied artillery played its part. The shrapnel shell that took Marmont and his second-in-command out of the battle was not luck. It was the targeted use of superior technology. At the battle's most critical moment, Wellington's shell decapitated his enemy's command structure. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery all applied at the exact right place, at the exact right time, under the direction of a single, decisive mind. Salamanca was the work of a general at the absolute peak of his powers. It was a battle won by patience, by concealment, by tactical supremacy, and by the decisive, lightning-fast recognition of a single, fatal error. The victory at Salamanca echoed across Europe, finding its way to the ears of a preoccupied emperor. Thousands of miles away, in the vast, hostile expanse of Russia, Napoleon Bonaparte received the news of Marmont's catastrophe. It was a bitter, infuriating blow. He had entrusted Spain to his marshals, believing them more than capable of containing Wellington's small army, while he pursued his destiny in the east. Now, in the same season, he was faced with a dual crisis: his own ruinous march on Moscow and the sudden, humiliating collapse of his power in the peninsula. The Spanish ulcer, which had drained his empire of men and gold for years, had just become malignant. For Wellington, Salamanca was a total vindication. He was no longer just the sepoy general, a colonial soldier who had gotten lucky. He was no longer just the master of the defense, the man who hid behind the lines of Torres Vedras or the ridges of Busaco. At Salamanca, he had met a first-rate French marshal, at the head of a veteran, equal-sized army, in an open battle of maneuver, the kind of battle the French excelled at, and he had utterly and completely out-generaled him. He had beaten them at their own game. His reputation was forged anew. From this day forward, he was recognized across Europe as one of the great captains of the age, the only general who had proven he could consistently defeat Napoleon's best. The strategic consequences were permanent. Although Wellington's subsequent advance would stall at the siege of Burgos, forcing him into a long retreat back to Portugal that winter, the damage to the French was done. They had been forced to abandon Madrid. They had been forced to lift the siege of Cadiz, effectively ceding all of southern Spain. They had to consolidate all their forces, pulling them from every corner of the country, just to push Wellington back. Their aura of invincibility was shattered. The Spanish guerrillas, inspired by the victory, redoubled their efforts. The French occupation, which had once stretched across the entire nation, was now fractured and shrinking. Salamanca was the turning point. It was the battle that broke the back of the French army of Portugal, and, with it, Napoleon's grip on Spain. It set the stage for the final decisive campaign of 1813. The army that Wellington would meet and decisively shatter at Vittoria the following year was an army still reeling from the psychological and material losses it had sustained at Salamanca. The 40-minute masterpiece had been the key that unlocked the door to France. Today, the battle is remembered as Wellington's most perfect victory. It was a battle of intellect, a testament to his profound understanding of his enemy, his terrain, and his own men. It was a victory born from weeks of relentless, patient maneuvering, followed by 40 minutes of exquisite, synchronized violence. It was the moment a hidden division burst from the earth, the moment 1,000 heavy horsemen tore the heart from an army, and the moment a single general's decision, in a flash of inspiration, changed the fate of a war. Marmont's army was not just defeated, it was undone. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, please hit the like button, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next video.